afternoon, everybody. I'd like to get started if we could. I want to welcome you all to the first college theme presentation of the academic year. My name is Michael Maher, and I'm a sociology professor here at Spoon River College. What you see on the board over here is this year's college theme poster. And our theme this year is the power of kindness, education, and empathy in challenging times. The faculty at Spoon River College have sponsored a college theme here for the past 16 years. And for the past 8 years, we have had our own in-house TED Talk series here. So I appreciate you coming to this first one, and I hope you plan to come to the next one as well. So the title of my presentation today is Reconciling with Our Past: History, Empathy, and Kindness. Now, full disclosure here, I am not a historian, nor do I consider myself to be an expert in any area of American history. But I have developed a love for learning history over the last 30 years as a practicing sociologist. Many of the issues that I teach about, it is extremely important to be able to present my students with a historical context to understand sociological research today. So that is my particular interest in this, and obviously I'm going to be talking about how learning our history can actually enhance our empathy and our ability to be kind to one another. First, let's talk about this year's college theme, because I don't want to assume anything here. What is empathy, and how is our ability to exhibit empathy impacted by our education? Simply put, the ability to mentally put ourselves into the shoes of someone else, to be able to vicariously experience what somebody else is experiencing. And that is, of course, particularly the case for me when it comes to people who are living lives that are very different from our own. I'm well aware of the fact that everybody in here exhibits empathy in your personal lives. You've got people in your life, your close family, friends, partners, whoever they may be, that I know that you all exhibit empathy with. That's not the kind of empathy that I am focusing in on today. As a sociologist, I am much more concerned with our ability to empathize with people who are in very different positions than we are. Sometimes positions we cannot even control. Why does this matter? Some of you may remember that on every single syllabus at Spoon River College, under the student learning outcomes, is listed number 4, exhibit human empathy. Every single faculty member at Spoon River College is devoted to that particular outcome and helping you cultivate the skills of empathy. That's how important it is. My colleagues in this room who are not history teachers, on some level, we are all history teachers. An academic maxim in challenging times, a maxim. A general truth, widely understood, oftentimes expressed in a memorable saying. Here is an academic maxim that I have used throughout my career, and it's one that I'm guessing that a lot of you are familiar with. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. One of the problems with using these kinds of maxims is that they can very easily be overused and sort of lose their value and lose their meaning. So I try to be very careful about how I use this. Now, the actual quote is, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." So I have used this throughout my teaching career. And about 10 years ago, I started to notice a very interesting trend among some of my students. Wouldn't say it was prevalent, but it was noticeable. Some of my students would come back to me and say, "You keep talking about, learning from history and not repeating it. I don't know what you're so concerned about. I mean, clearly we're not repeating things." And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about?" You talk about poll taxes and literacy tests that were used to prevent people from voting. It's not like we've re-implemented that. And I was sort of dumbfounded at first, you're taking it that literally, right? That you can't see or understand how, voter ID laws that are being enacted having a disproportionate impact on people who are poor and people of color as sort of the modern day incarnation of poll taxes. So because of the student feedback, I started backing away from this particular iteration of this quote, and I started using this one. history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. Now, there appears to be some debate about whether or not Mark Twain actually said this. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that particular area. But I do like the quote, because to me it was maybe a little bit more exact. It would speak specifically to some of these things that these students were telling me. No, it's not literally repeating itself, but you can really not see the rhyming going on here. I think, upon further reflection, that we need an update to this maxim. And the update is this, and you can see that this is me. I'm taking credit for this. Those who don't know our history and understand the impact of history on our present lack the historical context to understand the present and change the future. Now, I thought very carefully about this because there's something else that I have been noticing more recently. I seem to have been noticing people who appear to know quite a bit about certain aspects of American history, but who, when it comes to understanding the present day impact of that history, appear to be very, very lost. And this has started to really sort of perplex me. So I thought, well, I have to be more specific here in terms of why studying history is so important, especially in my discipline. Because an improved understanding of the present day impact of our history will then enhance our ability to exhibit empathy for others and harness the power of kindness, and more importantly, build support for public policies that finally reconcile with our past. Now, that is the main takeaway. What I just said, that is the main takeaway that I want you to leave here today with thinking about. Why should I care about our past, and how is it impacting our present? But I do want to provide you an example here to try to illustrate why this is important. And the example that I've chosen here is the racial wealth gap. Now, due to time constraints, I cannot spend a lot of time going through all of the data from all of the research and all of the organizations, but I can tell you that what I am showing you here is pretty representative of the research as a whole. That from 1989 to 2022, the black-white median wealth gap has averaged $172,000. In 2022, for every $100 in wealth held by white households, black households held only $15. Now, also for sake of simplicity here, I'm restricting this conversation to a comparison between the white population and the black population. Please understand that this racial wealth gap has its own sort of trajectory in other racial and ethnic groups. Collectively today, white people own a minimum of 80% of all wealth in the United States, while also consisting of approximately 60% of the population. By comparison, black people own approximately 5% of all wealth in the United States, while consisting of approximately 14% of the population. Now, for those of you who are white, you may be looking at that going, where's the wealth? I don't understand, right? I'm poor, I'm struggling, I'm working class. And you'd be right to point that out, because within the white population, of course, it is a very teeny tiny percentage of white people who own and control most of that wealth. That didn't happen overnight. You get that, right? Like, that didn't happen last week or last month or last year. If you're gonna understand the racial wealth gap today, in present day, we better figure out something that happened in the past. Now, again, due to time constraints, I know this is gonna be overwhelming to you. And I wanna give you some sense of what we're fighting up against. The Naturalization Act, 1790. As far as I understand it, one of the first laws passed by the first Congress of the United States stated that free white persons, and only free white persons, could be citizens of the United States and have the rights of citizenship. You might think that's a clear, unidentifiable statement, but I guarantee you it is not. I am a person who has both Irish and Italian ancestry. The Irish and Italian, when they first arrived in the United States, they were not white. They were not in the group yet. That took time. Also, as a point of comparison, which I think is sort of historically ironic right now, if you go back into the 1920s, people of Mexican ancestry were defined as white in the United States at that point in time. You see, race is a socio-historical legal construct that changes over time due to the interests of power structures. Who's in, who's not. 1619 to 1865, 246 years of enslavement. 1619, 20 slaves arrived in Virginia aboard a ship called the White Lion. 1862 Homestead Act, 270 million acres of land. land that was given almost exclusively to people who were white. Here, right? Here's 170 acres of land to use. Here you go. Welfare on a grand scale, right? Essentially white affirmative action. Late 1870s to mid 1960s, approximately 90 years of Jim Crow segregation, separate but equal. New Deal programs in the 1930s. Part of the reason that those New Deal programs were even allowed to be passed by Congress is because FDR gave in to the demands of Southern politicians who demanded that agricultural workers and domestic workers be excluded from those programs. Well, you know what's interesting about that? 80% of black people at this time worked in those professions. FHA loans between 1934 and 1962. 98% of FHA loan recipients were white. There was the process of redlining, in which banks would quite literally draw on maps neighborhoods around in red and deem them a bad bet in terms of bank loans. People of color living in those areas couldn't get the loan. And the GI Bill, 1944, established to provide educational and other benefits to returning World War II veterans. Again, on paper, everyone perhaps eligible, but in those years immediately following World War II, most people of color could not get into colleges and universities. So it was effectively not an effective or useful thing for them. Now, that's a big list, right? And you may or may not know anything about those specific things, but I just want you to take a look at that list and let it just sort of set in for a second. That is just a short listing of some of the historical reasons for the racial wealth gap data that I was pointing out on the previous slide. Now, I've been teaching long enough to understand that that laundry list, given to you in about 3.5 minutes, is very unlikely to be able to persuade anybody in here on the spot, right? I'm a professor, I'm not a magician, right? I can't do that, that's beyond my power. So instead, I'd like to try something else. To maybe make this a little bit more real and easier to comprehend right here at this moment. Because sometimes personal stories, histories will illuminate larger historical patterns and make it easier for us to see things like this. I'm guessing that most of you have probably quickly surmised who this person in the picture is in relationship to me. That is my father. It is a picture that I wanted to use because it is one of the few pictures that I know of where he is dressed in what I believe to be his Air Force uniform. My father graduated from Lane Tech High School in 1950 in Chicago. So white man, post-World War II, not a good student, didn't know what he wanted to do. So one night, he and a couple of his buddies decided, we're gonna join the Air Force. So they did. And he ended up in Arizona for a series of years, picked up a couple of trades during that time, but served his stint, worked his way back to Chicago, and at the very last minute decided he was going to make access to the GI Bill. So he comes down to Western, again, very last minute, gets enrolled over at WIU. He spends 4 years there. He earns his degree. He meets and marries my mother. They move to Palatine, Illinois. He gets a job in education. He's debt-free. Okay? He's debt-free. He's able to start a family. He's able to buy a home. Because he's debt-free, he's like, well, I'll go get a master's degree. And he does that. He goes to Roosevelt University and he gets a master's degree. Upon earning that master's degree, he moves my mom and my 3 older siblings out of Palatine, Illinois into northwestern Illinois. He gets a job as a school administrator, better paying job, higher status. Starts working as a basketball coach as well. 1970, he and my mother are able to build a home, like $42,000. Yeah, they don't have any debt. 1972, I come along. So there I am. That's my reality, right? That's my starting point, right? By the time I get to junior high, they've got their house paid off. They're able to send their kids to college tuition free, including me. I was not a good student in high school, but I went to college because my parents were in a financial position to do so. Now, there's one thing I can tell you about me at 18 years old, and that is this. If the only way I could have gotten into college was to go into debt to pay off my tuition, there is no way I go. I would not have gone to college. I don't know what would have happened to me. I would probably be living in my hometown doing God knows what to make a living. I'll be coaching basketball. What is that? Okay, so they have their home. It's paid off. I'm in junior high. Okay, fast forward about 35 years, my parents die. Their house has been paid off forever. They got all kinds of equity built up in that home. We sell the house. Who gets the inheritance? Me and my siblings. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at here? Wealth accumulates across generations. I was not alive. I didn't do anything myself to create that historical legacy. But nonetheless, I cashed in on it. It was an unearned advantage that I had, and I think I need to own that, right? I could stand up here and say, well, the reason you're hearing from me today is because I'm the sharpest crayon in the box. I'm the brightest bulb, right? Right? Well, I worked hard. Yeah, sure. I did work hard. But you know what? I worked hard within context, and I had a lot of doors open for me that are rooted in the historical legacy of white supremacy. And I'm just going to say this because I know it's going to be on somebody's mind, right? Well, he's trying to make us feel guilty, especially those of us who are white. No. Guilt is an emotion you experience for something that you have done, for something that you have said. Nobody in this room is responsible for the whole historical legacy that I was talking about previously. This has nothing to do with guilt. It has to do with the truth, it has to do with accountability, and it has to do with responsibility for owning up to this, right? We are not on a level playing field because we've not reconciled with our history. We have not gone back and fixed this. These are obviously questions that I want you to answer in your head. These are issues that are near and dear to my heart. These are issues that I have taught about my entire teaching career. I've already told you that I don't consider myself a historical expert in any of those fields, but I do know something about the history of all of those. How much do you really know about the history of each of those following issues? Just go down the list. You may be totally invested in the news cycle today. You may be able to tell me everything that's going on right now today. That is not the question I am asking you. I'm asking you, do you know anything about the history of any of those areas, of any of those movements? And if the answer for you personally is no, not really, then I have to follow it up with, if we don't know this history, then how can we develop an informed position on these issues to support public policies that actually exhibit empathy for historically marginalized communities? We can't. Now you might look at that list and go, that's too much. I'm busy. I got a job. I got this responsibility. I got that responsibility. Well, you know what? You're in luck. You're in luck because we live in a society with people who are experts. People who have devoted their lives to understanding the history of one or more of these movements. They're out there. They're not that difficult to find. They write these things called books. And those books are up in the second level of centers over there, waiting for you to come in to pick them up and to read them. That is how you sort of start to develop your own expertise. Or at bare minimum, your college education should provide you the skills to be able to identify who the experts are, the people who truly know and understand what they're talking about. They are very helpful to helping us form an actual sort of perspective and opinion about these and other issues. Historical knowledge is going to enhance our ability to demonstrate empathy and to ultimately be kind. And you will never have a better opportunity in your life to expand your historical knowledge of this nation than in the years that you spend in college. Do not pass this up. You know, I handle some scheduling here at the college. And some of the scheduling I do is for courses in history. And I can tell you that over the decade, I see what y'all are doing. You're avoiding the history classes. You're doing that to your own detriment. You are hindering your ability to develop the skills of empathy and to ultimately be kind. Don't run away from those classes. You need them. Because if you choose to reject this opportunity, it's going to have ramifications in your everyday life. It's going to have ramifications for you as a citizen of democracy. So, people are probably thinking it, right? I'm not responsible for creating this mess, so I'm not cleaning it up. I already acknowledged the fact that you didn't create any of this, but you inherited it. I want you to consider that statement in the aftermath of a multi-car collision on a freeway. Dozens of damaged cars, pieces of metal scattered everywhere. Do we just kind of look at that situation and say, you know what, it didn't personally involve me. I'm not connected to it in any way. So I'm not going to take responsibility whatsoever for cleaning up the mess or assisting with cleaning up the mess. We're just going to let it sit there, allowing the wreckage to accumulate over days, weeks, decades, possibly centuries. Like I said, it's not about guilt. It's about responsibility and accountability and cleaning up the mess that we inherited so that we can actually have a level playing field and maybe even actually be a meritocracy. Regardless of who's responsible for creating the mess, we have to take responsibility. And if we're unwilling to do that, if we're unwilling to voluntarily do this, you need to be clear about what the potential impact is. You may or may not be aware that over the last decade there has been an explosion of books like this written across academic disciplines. You've got to pay attention to this.